Hi everyone and welcome, this is the Apostate Prophet. It is nowadays a problematic thing to speak about how Islam spread, which is why I love doing it. In the West, this talk is often considered offensive and sensitive because it could inspire Islamophobic sentiments. Many modern Muslim circles try to clear the name of Islam and try to make it something that it is not. Others simply don't want to talk about it. Why bother talking about the spread of Islam when we can continuously talk about the transatlantic slave trade, which was smaller than the Arab slave trade, and the Crusades, which were a response to the spread of Islam? It is a historical fact that Islam spread violently, and wherever we look, we can only confirm this. Islam started here and spread to so many different lands, even to Spain, Italy, and the Balkans, before it was kicked out. It ruled India for centuries, a population that wasn't interested in converting at all. And Islam was carried by large empires in history that had one clear mission: conquer the world and spread Islam. Looking at Muhammad's history, the whole picture is very messy. The problem is that basically all sources about this part of history are Islamic sources, and history is written by the victor, the Muslims. Yet even that history tells us things that wouldn't put Islam in a good position. As far as we know, Muhammad was tolerated for a while with his new religion that he proposed to the people of Mecca. When he became more disrespectful to the idols of the polytheists and their traditions, and insisted more on converting to his religion, he was increasingly threatened, and later an ambush was planned on him, and he had to flee, together with his believers, of whom some were reportedly persecuted. They fled to Medina, which was north of Mecca. The interesting part here is that Muhammad didn't just settle down in Medina and start a new life with his believers from here, where he would just spread the Islamic religion and peacefully invite people to Islam. Muhammad quickly became a warlord. He was quick in gathering forces, initially among those who traveled with him to Medina, known as the Muhajirun, the immigrants. They made several unsuccessful caravan raids against the Meccan polytheists. After a few empty expeditions, one little group that he sent to watch a Meccan caravan attacked the caravan, killed and captured traders, and took the booty. This was made in a sacred month where fighting was not allowed by Arabian tradition. Instead of making things right, Muhammad justified the attack, and a Quran verse was supposedly revealed, in which Allah himself was defending the attackers. They ask you concerning fighting in the sacred months. Say, fighting therein is a great sin, but averting from the way of Allah and disbelief in Him, and preventing access to Masjid al-Haram, the Kaaba, and the expulsion of its people therefrom, are a greater evil in the sight of Allah. And fitna is greater than killing. And they will continue to fight you until they turn you back from your religion, if they are able. What the Quran does here is basically to excuse the Muslim aggression against the Arab pagans, because the pagans previously prevented the Muslims from praying and relocating to the Kaaba. Notice, Islam's first move is not to calm down, to forgive those who persecuted them, to forgive those who didn't know, to spread the religion by setting an example, being peaceful and inviting people to Islam in a nice way. It is to attack the pagans, take their land, and subjugate them, because the land they hold belongs to Allah and the Muslims. Due to this aggression by Muhammad, a large conflict started, and this conflict went on until Muhammad invaded Mecca, secured the Kaaba, destroyed the idols, and all temples of the polytheists in Arabia, banned pagans from coming near the Kaaba, went on fighting the rest of them, until everyone was killed or converted to Islam. And this is how Islam was established as the religion of Arabia. Victory tasted so good. Muhammad needed more. He was addicted. At the time these conflicts happened, the Quran's language became increasingly hostile, not only against the pagans, but also against Jews, who vastly rejected Muhammad, and Christians. In a Quran verse, the Quran instructs Muslims to fight all those who don't believe in Allah and Muhammad, and to subjugate them, and forcibly take protection money from them if they don't convert or die. After that, Islam quickly became an empire, a religion and an empire. These empires were known as caliphates, where the state is not only ruled by someone approved by the religious leader, like in the Christian world. The head of the empire was also the head of the religion, the caliph, or the caliph. This caliph had the obligation to use the forces of the empire to conquer and subjugate other nations in order to spread Islam. When other nations were subjugated, the Christians and Jews were forced to pay protection money to the Islamic State. Thereby they could go on practicing their religion, but their religious freedoms were heavily curbed. Other minorities, especially black Africans in Africa, were usually enslaved, regardless of age or gender. When Zoroastrians, Hindus, and Buddhists were subjugated in high numbers, those were also suppressed and forced to pay protection money in exchange for their lives. Now, Muslims like to say that there is no compulsion in Islam, that you can't forcibly convert someone to Islam. I want to make a distinction here. Individuals weren't forcibly converted to Islam in that they had a sword held to their head and they had to make a choice between converting and dying. Although historians agree that this happened here and there as well. What happened is that Islam conquered nations, subjugated them, limited their rights, and continuously humiliated them in order to push conversion. Minority religions weren't allowed to build any more temples, propagate their religion, celebrate and practice their religion loudly. They had to acknowledge Islam's superiority, Islamic supremacy, and they could lose their protection if they offended Islam in any way. The protection money taken from infidels was collected in ways that would heavily humiliate the non-believer. And humiliation is its purpose, according to the Quran. When you live under Islam and see that Muslims are superior and they live great lives and that Islam is going to rule you and they are much stronger, it is probably a good idea to convert to Islam. And if you won't, your children probably will, or their children, until your community converts to Islam and disappears. This is how the Islamic conversion happened. This is how Islam conquered and people became Muslims. If we want to roughly look at the world and where Islam went, Islam was spread to Arabia mostly by Muhammad's campaigns. It was spread to the Middle East, the eastern part of North Africa, and Persia through invasions under the Rashidun Caliphate, which is the caliphate led by the four companions of Muhammad after he died. It was spread through wars to the west of North Africa, to Spain, to India, and Central Asia by the Umayyad Caliphate. At that time, Muslims even attacked Francia, today's France, and were gladly unsuccessful. In some regions, like parts of Central Asia, the religion was spread by conversion to some Turkic tribes, for example, that were impressed by Islam and then joined the religious forces to fight and spread Islam to others and to their own people. In Africa, traders were introduced to Islam, although much of the conversion came due to the power of Islamic empires. Islam was spread to Italy by conquest and later gladly kicked out. To Anatolia, today's Turkey, by Turkic empires. To the Balkans and up north the Caucasus by the Ottomans. Throughout these 1,400 years, the Islamic empires were constantly at war with the European Christian world. These massive invasions by Muslims into Christian land sent shockwaves through the West. The Crusades were answers to calls for help by Christians to unite and to stop these invaders. Christians were used to being attacked by Muslims that turned out to be more threatening than Vikings. The term Islamophobia was initially used to describe the fear of a real or perceived threat of Islam as a political force, because that's how it was for so long. Later, this term became corrupted and turned into a synonym for racism by self-hating softies. There is one case that Muslims just love to mention whenever you bring up the bloody spread of Islam: Southeast Asia. In Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Islam spread through Muslim traders and Sufi orders that would frequently visit the region. They made good trading connections and converted some important people to Islam, who then, by controlling large communities, spread Islam to others. Southeast Asia is pretty much the only place where Islam wasn't established through invading forces. And many modern Muslim apologists or moderate Muslims love to mention Indonesia because they know that's the only thing they can bring up in response. Other than that, almost everywhere, Islam appeared through invasions by empires that carried the threatening banner of Islam. And most nations that are Muslims today are Muslims because they were conquered, invaded, subjugated, humiliated, forcibly converted, pushed into converting to Islam. Not only did they convert to Islam, their cultures were also heavily damaged and in many cases completely eradicated and replaced by Arab culture, including language and alphabets. See, it could have just happened a different way. Muslims could have peacefully invited the world to Islam, and people could have peacefully converted if Islam had been so peaceful and so beautiful. Why did Islam need to be forced into everyone's life by an endless campaign of conquests? Why did Islam need to be an empire? Why is Islam a religion that started as a military force, violently conquered and changed so many cultures, and was only stopped because the West prevailed and forced Islam to be tame by international laws and pressure? Why did Islam have to eradicate cultures? Can people in the 21st century really believe that everyone is supposed to have a single culture, Islamic culture, which is why the cultures of so many nations were eradicated? I'm not saying that it is anything unique to Islam, that the religion was spread by the sword, and that Muslims engaged in centuries of bloody conquests. I'm also not saying we can single out Islam and blame it for violence in the past. Violence and conquest were common in the past. That's how things went. That's how we learned. Many cultures, ideas, religions, even great ideas spread that way. That was part of our history, our evolution. What I'm saying is that most Muslims believe in Islam now because it was spread by the sword, not because it was so convincing, so attractive, not because millions of people in such a huge extent heard of this religion and thought, hey, let's convert to this. What I'm saying is that Islam didn't just spread by the sword like any other idea. Islam was spread by the sword because Islam orders its followers to spread it by the sword and to fight the infidel. What I'm saying is that Muhammad explicitly said that he was commanded by his God to fight the people until they testify that none can be worshipped but Allah and that he is Allah's messenger. What I'm saying is that Islam is not misunderstood and not peaceful. It never brought peace, only the sword. And the sentiment of Islamophobia, originally anxiety and rejection of everything that is Islam, because Islam was an invading force that came through empires and attacked over and over again, was justified and probably still is justified, because Islam stopped invading countries not too long ago, and not voluntarily. And many among the followers of Islam think and hope that this is only temporary. Islam should not be downplayed and whitewashed and taken lightly. Islam is not misunderstood. Islam does not preach tolerance. Islam is not a religion of peace. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to like, to subscribe and to share. Most of my videos are not monetized, so you can watch them without ads. If you want to support my cause, you can support me on Patreon or on apostateprophet.com. I appreciate all your support so much. In the future, I should go more into how specific cultures converted to Islam. I'll be back very soon. Have a great day, and stay away from Islam.